weekend, weddings, plannings?
Not weddings, but it was kind of crazy because my brother's kids, they went camping, so they left all of their children with my dad and my stepmom. So we went over there like Friday and Saturday to try to like entertain them a little bit. There's like 4 of them, like 8, 7, 4, and 3, and it was like insane. They just have way too much energy.
They have 4 kids under 8.
Mm-hmm.
I thought 3 under 10 was crazy for us.
Yeah, it's really there's a lot of crying. I need to wait a few years before I'm a parent for sure.
I'm 44 and Harper is 10, so I waited until I was 34. I think you have some time.
Yeah, there's a lot of crying.
That happens. That's what kids do.
Yeah, and like nothing wears them out. They went on like a 5-mile walk with my stepmom, and they were like still jumping off the walls when they got back.
Yeah, that sounds about right with kids. We started the day with me laying the hammer down on my kids because every piece of technology that they touched was left out and unattended, whether it was my iPad, an Alexa, a video game controller, the remote for the TV. And as we're getting back to school, I lined them all up and asked who left them all out. I said, all right, not for a week. Do you get the Xbox? Do you get the TV? Do you get the iPads? Do you get anything? And it was very much a wake-up call for them that we've got to get back to normal, guys. We can't just be crazy and trash in the house.
Yeah. So they started this week?
No, my wife teaches at St. Patrick's in White Lake, and it's a Catholic school, and she is going back face-to-face. So she is at school all week doing meetings, doing prep, doing planning, trying to arrange desks and
So they are in person? Wow.
So that means Dad's home with them till 10 a.m. when a grandparent will come by to relieve them. So they've got their homework and workbooks to do because we're trying to give them some semblance of still normalcy in education over the summer. So, you know, it's breakfast, it's chores, it's their homework, and they're not always very happy with me about that. But somebody's going to be a hard ass.
So are they going to go to school in person?
No, they're going to be all remote. So they're giving my 5-year-old an iPad and are explaining that they're going to teach her kindergarten through an iPad.
Ooh.
Yeah.
She'll be okay.
Well, she's in the same boat as every other kindergartner in the country. So, well, at least in the state. So, all right. Olivia, are you there? I will unmute Olivia if she'll let me.
My internet's a little funky at work, so it breaks in and out a lot.
No worries. All right. So, there you are. I'm just sending a quick text. Hold on. All right, so why don't we start with VIPs anyway, and we'll start with I-10 moments while we're waiting for Dr. Sarah to hop on. And Michelle, I think, is opting for personal one-on-one training. Nothing against you guys, but she just feels that the real estate thing is very specific for what she needs, so she and I are going to pivot away from the classroom stuff. But give us an I-10 moment. Give us something great that happened to you this week, Laurel.
It's what I talked about earlier. I got to see all my little nieces and nephews, even though it was kind of hard, but it was fun. And we celebrated my stepmom's birthday. So that was kind of cool too, that all of us were there to do that with her.
Very cool. Olivia, any I-10 moments?
Yeah, this past weekend I live in an apartment complex and I was at the pool and I met this really nice older lady and her brother who was like 65 was visiting her and I spent a few hours just talking with them and it was really nice just hearing different people's stories. So I did enjoy that.
Really? So give us what the most interesting you learned from her about her life.
So she's recently divorced or going through getting divorced. And she's been at the apartment complex for about 4 weeks. It's the first time she's ever been on her own. She has 2 cats, and so she's just trying to learn how to navigate life on her own, especially in a new area. She was from Saginaw. And then hearing just the dynamics between her husband and then the brother and their family. I mean, everybody has weird families, but her brother lives with her ex actually, and like just weird stuff. So it's just interesting to learn other people's lives.
I would say so. Well, my I-10 is, I always talk about roles and identities. And as we kind of get deeper into this, we will do a whole thing on roles versus identities and I-10s and everything else. But you understand that a big part of these I-10 check-ins is just something positive about our lives, something positive that's our self-esteem that makes us top of our game no matter what we do and what role we are in. So my role as a Cub Scout den leader and as a dad is we had all these Cub Scouts with their little Pinewood Derby cars that they built to race back in March, and it was canceled. So a bunch of the dads got together and we went and put up the track and we did a Facebook Live and ran all the kids' cars through the tracks and still had a Pinewood Derby for the kids. And all the moms and dads were taking pictures, sending them to us of the kids focused on the Facebook Live on their big TV or on their phone or on the iPad. So I feel like we gave a little bit of normalcy and a little bit more back to the kids. And even though they all didn't win, we made sure that they all got a trophy dropped off at their house afterwards for either winning or participating. And that was a lot of them, I think, the first kind of recognition they had gotten since school shut down, because there was no end of year sports. There was no end of year academic awards. There was no Cub Scout graduation to the next level ceremony. It was all just kind of stopped. So that made me feel really good that we could actually, our dads took our Friday nights and our Saturday mornings to do that. So that's my I-10. That was a really good thing. As far as VIPs, and do you guys remember what VIPs stand for?
Yeah. Victories.
Impending events and problems.
So we are all continuing to sell. We are all continuing to train. Good morning, Dr. Sarah. I was on a networking call with Sarah Barnett this morning for the Auburn Hills Chamber, and she got called into an internal meeting. So she's not going to be able to make it, or she's going to make it late, and she apologizes, but her boss called her in. And then Michelle Trenta thinks that she needs one-on-one personalized training. So nothing against you girls. It's not, she said, I hate them. I don't want to see them ever again. She just said, Chris, we need to do something one-on-one. So we're taking that offline. Sarah Barnett, we're doing our I-10 moments. I'm sorry, Dr. Sarah, we're doing our I-10 moments. Give us a good something from your week.
I should be able to give you like a whole handful.
Yeah.
Back on the wagon as far as moving the bus forward with some corporate stuff.
Great.
Tips, and feeling a little bit more like I have a direction rather than in the dark.
Good. Do you want to share any of that direction with us, or am I pushing too much?
No, so a lot of it for me was I was thinking like higher level, right? So I was thinking bigger than currently I really needed. And really all I need is, a small group of people who understand what we're trying to do to start to get some footing. Smaller companies, HR directors who are looking for their own personal development and growth. Here I am like, here's where I want to be and how do I fill the gap? And right now I don't need to fill the gap. Right now I just need to find people that I can help and serve in a much smaller way.
Gotcha.
Build in.
Cool. All right, so we're going on to VIPs. Laurel just reminded us that VIPs are victories, impending events, and problems, and this is within your sales world, within your Sandler world. So Laurel, give us a VIP, please.
Mine is kind of a problem, I guess. So as we're like searching for opportunities for grants, I reach out, and this happens a lot because this happened to me at Oakland too. I'll reach out to like different departments and ask them for like what do they need money for, pretty much, so I can use their projects to apply for grants. And they either, I need money for this, but they don't know how much, and they don't have a budget and nothing around it except that's what they want to do, or I just get like no ideas. And the reason we're asking for more specific projects is because right now, the obvious funds for general operation, because that's like what is being affected by COVID, and we don't have enough corporate partners that are committing and hiring our students. So therefore we have to compensate for the money that we're losing. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, general operation, but in order to alter in our general operation towards like the mission of all these foundations, like I need like specific projects. So if a foundation focuses on like education and like health and wellness, then I can ask for like sports programs or athletic programs. But how much do we ask for, and what do you need it for, and what's your budget? And it's like a question mark. So it's like there's a lot of opportunity to ask for money, but the faculty and staff don't want to take like the time together or something, because like I don't one of their programs or their projects, so it's kind of like a one person like gig right now in development.
Okay, so two things that might help you. Are you familiar with the CFSEM and then as well the MichiganFoundations.org?
Yeah.
You are.
Not the C. I know of Council of Michigan, but I don't know totally about it. But I do know the Community Foundation.
So both of these have directories where you can actually get a list of corporations and foundations that are out there, and grants that might be by category. Again, education, education, special needs, poverty, all that kind of stuff.
I use Foundation directory right now, which is
okay.
Right now.
So kind of this goes into some of the questioning strategies where you can use Sandler in your daily life, and having an upfront contract with these people that you go and talk to and say, I really want to help you and I'm really looking for a grant. Can you agree to do this, this, and this? And if you do, I will do this, this, and this, and we can move forward. Or even presenting them with some more specific questions. I know a lot of times as a fundraiser, the people that are receiving the funds treat you as, well, you should be giving me more funds, and then you ask them for help, and it's like, shouting into an empty room. So today, as we go through some of the stuff on upfront contracts and some of the stuff on questioning strategies, maybe it can help you not only dealing with external people that you might be asking for donations for, but it can help you with your internal constituents that you might be able to put some good Sandler into place, that you're not wasting your time with them. It sounds like your biggest frustration is chasing right now.
Yeah.
You're chasing these people, trying to help them. There might be a really easy upfront contract you can have with them to let them know what they need to do to be a part of this. And if they're not going to honor that commitment, that you're moving on to somebody else.
Yeah. And I even made it like super easy for them, because I made like a form that they would just fill out. It has the budgets of everything, just like don't want to take the time. And I understand everyone's busy, but I guess like, what are the questions to ask that would like provoke them to want to help or be involved?
Yeah. All right. We'll get back to that. Olivia, give us a VIP.
My VIP for the week would probably be a victory. As I mentioned last time, one of my impending events is my golf outing. That's where my 100% focus is right now, is just preparing for the golf outing. And so this week we sold all of our teams. So we're going to have, most of our money is going to be made at the event. So having people at the event was one of our biggest things we needed to do. And now we have the people at the event. So that's a victory for sure for the week.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's very cool. Dr. Sarah, give us a VIP in your selling world.
So Victory, again, just going through the week as a whole, just getting really clear about what it is that we're doing and how to help people a little bit more one-on-one. I was looking, I think the biggest win for me was I was looking at people being at home with corporate as a negative and a huge detriment. And for me, it might be the biggest win ever because they're pivoting anyway. So they're open to much more new ideas.
Yeah. I don't know, and this is not to get political, but the CDC just released how much in their most recent surveys there's been issues with substance abuse, with depression, with anxiety, with suicidal thoughts.
Well, and I actually heard that there's companies that are so hard pressed to have people working from home that instead of sending them home with a laptop, they sent them home with their desktop because they're so averse to having them work anywhere else that they're not even giving them the tools and resources they would need to be more versatile.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting as we move forward with this, and I think there's definite value in what you can offer at this time. You know, the whole, you guys know I'm big in sports and active in lacrosse. You know, the debate right now about what sports means to these kids' mental health and whether or not we're postponing sports or canceling sports. I know a lot of really stressed out kids and parents that I think they need nothing more than exercise and to be outdoors and getting fresh air, but that's for another topic, another time. All right, quick review of last week. Did anyone have any questions on what we covered? I will get rid of this screen and I will share the PowerPoint. And I know what we're going to cover today, but as we go back and review stuff like disc profiles, we review stuff like okay and not okay, as we review stuff like buzzwords, is there anything in there that you guys reviewed your notes and said, hey, Chris, I really needed you to explain that again, or I really need help with something? Dr. Sarah's good. Laurel, you look like you're about to ask something.
It's not really like I have a question about anything, because I tried to like remember throughout the week like the different characteristics, and I just had a really hard time trying to like identify someone as something, I guess.
So I think what I said I was going to do is send you guys some of these notes, and I don't think I ever did. So I will take a couple of quick snapshots of some of this stuff and send it to you. And obviously a lot of this is available online, but I want you to be able to print it, keep it, you know, whatever you guys, you know, like I said, I print it out and I keep it on my screen or on my desk. All right, so we call it disc. So there's that one, and there's this one, and there's this one. So do you remember what, if you can remember nothing else, do you remember what the letters D, I, S, and C stand for? Without looking at your notes.
I know that D is dominant, right?
Yes.
I feel like S was like steady or something.
Steady relator.
Well, now that I put it on the screen, Sarah, of course you get it. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's go through these. And while we go through these, I want you to think in your mind of somebody that this reminds you of, and even because I probably don't know them, shout out their name as soon as we finish it. So D is very dominant, task-oriented, and extroverted, right? D's, and I just sent you guys this here, as well as these two. These are decisive, tough, and impatient, strong-willed and competitive, demanding and independent, direct, tends to not listen. And I also sent you this one. When dealing with D's, be direct, brief, and to the point, focus on the task, use a results-oriented approach, ensure that they win. They are very competitive. Use a logical approach, touch on high points and big ideas, don't get down in the details. Don't touch them, keep your distance, don't be emotional, and they act quickly because they decide fast. And if you act quickly, they will decide fast. So who's a D in your world?
I think I'm a D.
Anyone? Anyone? These can traditionally be very much referred to as alpha males, or you know, the head person in charge. There's normally a negative acronym for that. But D's can be very over the top. So our suggestion on how to communicate with them is be direct and brief. Going back, I's. I stands for?
Influencer.
Yes. And with I's, they're very sociable, talkative, and open. They're very enthusiastic and energetic, persuasive, spontaneous, impulsive, and emotional, and they talk more than they listen. Within the I's, allow time for socialization, make sure it's light, have fun with them, ask for their feelings and opinions, use touch, forearm and back, meaning when you shake their hand, don't be afraid to put your hand on their forearm, that kind of thing. Be friendly and warm, set aside time for chatting, let them speak, give them recognition when they do speak, and again, speak about people and feelings in the decisions, not just the data or not just a quick decision. Anyone know an I?
My boyfriend's brother Mario, I think, is an I.
Olivia, Sarah?
I think my boss is kind of an I.
I'm waiting for Sarah to say you. I'm a super high I. This is me to a T.
Why am I going to call you out? You already know. You don't need Sandler training.
We're trying to give examples. All
I'm
right.
sorry, Chris Join, you are definitely an I.
All right. Thank you. Needed to be reassured that today, I guess. All right. S's. What does S's stand for?
Steady relator.
Calm, steady, laid back, careful, patient, amiable. Listens carefully, very sincere, very modest, can be very indecisive, have to have trust. They have to have trust before they make a decision. Remember, going back to what we said, people buy from people they like, people buy from people like them, hence people buy from people they trust and like that are like them. So, if talking to a introverted, people-oriented person, build that trust. Be very patient with them. Draw out their opinions. Relax and allow time for discussion. Show how solutions affect people. Clearly define all the areas. Involve them in the planning. Make a very slow and methodical presentation because they will be needing to go through step by step. Provide any information they need. Again, for them, it's trust. They need to have all the facts. And then you secure commitments from them step by step, which will also roll back into what we're going to cover today, which is upfront contracts. Can anyone think of an S besides Olivia?
Rodney.
Yes. Rodney's Dr. Sarah's business partner, Dr. Rodney.
And also my brother-in-law.
Yes. He's married to her sister.
So complicated.
But a hell of a good chiropractor when Sarah isn't available.
Yes. Totally agree.
All right. Last one. Laurel, don't cheat. What's the C stand for?
Compliant.
You cheated. Compliance, task-oriented, introverted. I'm starting a class with 2 technology guys this week, and they are both super high C's. They are techies. Precise, exact, and analytical. Logical and systematic. Does not express emotions, and they are careful, formal, disciplined, and quiet. They are the techies. They are the engineers. They are the people that are very, very, very organized when it comes to the decision-making process. Again, introverted and task-oriented. Communicating with them. You have to use facts and data, and you have to have confidence in accurate facts and data. They will call bullshit if you try to bring them facts and data that are not accurate. They have to do it as a mathematical equation. Examine an argument thoroughly. They have to keep on task, and they are not much about socialization. Some friendly conversation, a lighthearted joke, but they're not going to be impressed by your ability to baffle them with stories and in social situations. If you ever have a disagreement with them, you can disagree on the facts, but they will not disagree with you as a person. They don't take it personally. They take it and look at the facts. They like to use proven ideas and data. Do not touch them because they are very introverted. They very much like their space and their distance, including in conference rooms. Sit further away from them. Don't talk about personal issues and explain things carefully. Everyone think of a C in their world.
My brothers are a little bit like C's. They've all gone to engineering, computer programming school, so.
Very much so.
I could think of 36 patients of mine who I overwhelm within 5 seconds of meeting them because they're like the engineer types.
Yeah. And Sarah, some of this, when, think about your kind of bedside manner, your approach to dealing with people, and you very much are talk fast, act fast, decision fast, kind of stuff. And I get that, and I love that, and my son Gannon gets that, and he loves that. But especially with C's that don't like to be touched, and you're a chiropractor, that's kind of what you do. Not saying that this is going to be something to take Sandler into your care, but just be conscious with C's that they need less personal stories and more data and facts.
Yes.
So, we good? That's the DISC review. Laurel, what does DISC stand for? D is?
Dominant.
I is? Flu.
Influencer.
Yes. S is?
Steady.
Relator.
Relator.
Yes. And C stands for?
Compliant.
Yes. So I just sent you guys an email that has this graphic, how to identify, and then this graphic with how to communicate. Like I said, I encourage you, print them out and keep them around as you will continue to, as you are, this is the good thing about us being in Zoom world right now. We're not having nearly as many face-to-face conversations, so we can cheat. Right? I have notes all over the place on my desk that reminds me to think about my upfront contract, to think about my DISC analysis of people. Once I've figured out what I think they are in a DISC profile, I then have notes to remind myself how to communicate with them in a sales call or how to train them once we actually get into training. Cool? All right, let's begin this week. So this week is all about the elements in terms of an upfront contract. So the outline is, when should you make an upfront contract? Upfront contract using A-NOT. Write that down, please, A-NOT. And then the Sandler rules for upfront contracts. So at the end of this, we're going to talk about mutual mystification and how we get rid of it. Mutual mystification is both me and the party I'm talking to have happy ears and we're hearing what we want to hear, not necessarily what the facts are. At the end of this, we want to define and explain the 5 elements of an upfront contract, where to best use upfront contracts, understanding what A-NOT stand for, and explain the acceptable outcome of any meeting. This can be a sales meeting, this can be a prospecting meeting, this can be a donor meeting, this can be a patient meeting, any of this. So to accomplish this, we're going to go over the reasons for why we use an upfront contract, when and who should use the upfront contracts, and that there must be a mutual agreement for a valid upfront contract. So, ready to begin? Everyone confused, even in general, of what an upfront contract is? Okay. So, want to do some role playing?
Sure.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to divide up into roles. So we're going to need a salesperson that's going to conduct the typical first 5 minutes of your sales call. We're going to have a prospect responding as a non-hostile and accommodating buyer, and then an observer to watch the sales call and listen to make sure the salesperson covers the following points: the purpose of the call, the buyer's expectations, the salesperson's expectations, the timing of the meeting, and the outcomes. Too much? Too fast?
That's a lot.
Okay, so we're going to hold off on that. We're going to get to that in a second. But I just want to kind of foreshadow where we're going to get to with this. So, the term mutual mystification. I refer to this as happy ears. We've all done it. Whether it's with our family, our parents, what we want to hear when we're talking to them. It's what we do with clients. It's what we do with salespeople talking to us. Mutual mystification is that little part where we hear what we want to hear. We don't clarify and get the information we're looking for. We verify basic information, but we don't verify the actual information. So the way that we do this is we have an upfront contract. So an upfront contract is the basis for Sandler. Once we finish our bonding and rapport, we step into the submarine's next step, which is the upfront contract. Mutual mystification, again, happy ears. An upfront contract will help us avoid this type of problem. The upfront contract is the mechanism by which the salesperson, us, and the prospect agree before a meeting even happens to exactly what will take place at this meeting. This upfront contract becomes the agenda for the meeting, and it takes pressure off of both of us. Okay? It is agreed to ahead of time. Once the agenda is established, you and your prospect can feel a lot more comfortable because everything has been foreshadowed. Everything that went possibly covered has been established. There are no unfulfilled expectations and no second guessing about what's going to take place. Either one of you can divert attention from the meeting and damage the rapport, but what we really want to learn how to do is to establish this upfront contract with prospects and learn why this is such an important part of the Sandler selling system. So in order to accomplish this, you'll need to have 5 key elements of this in the terms for an upfront contract. So the 5 key elements of an upfront contract are: number 1, the purpose of the meeting. Why are you there? Why are they there? The purpose of the meeting has to be upfront. Second element, the prospect's agenda and their expectations. The third part, your agenda and your expectations. Last part is the time of the meeting. That has to be in the upfront contract. And then the fourth part, and then the last part is the outcome. What are the acceptable outcomes and endings of this meeting? So, I'm going to read this out loud. An upfront contract is a mechanism by which the salesperson and the prospect agree before a meeting to exactly what will take place during the meeting. No mutual mystification, no happy ears. We get this all on the table. Everyone's on the same page. I talk about the Sandler 49 rules. An upfront contract is an important part of Sandler because it allows you, the salesperson, to maintain control during all phases of the selling process. Without a contract, without an upfront contract, who will be in control? The prospect, right? No mutual mystification. If we have everything up front, we are good. So, when I talk about an upfront contract as a mechanism and a process, there are 5 elements, and every upfront contract needs to have these 5 elements, and they need to be established before the meeting for what will take place during the meeting. So, first one is, as I said, the purpose of the meeting. The purpose of, yeah.
We might not have gotten there yet, but is the purpose of the meeting to sell them? Is the purpose to get to know them? Is the purpose to understand if you have like goals and objectives? Because in theory, when you get on the phone, I mean, if you're setting up an upfront contract with someone, your objective, is it in the relationship or is it just on that call?
Great question.
Is that, maybe it doesn't make sense.
No,
Like,
it makes complete sense.
My goal was talking to Laurel today, maybe to figure out how her weekend was. But a long-term part of our relationship is to get to know her better, you know, be great friends, work with each other. You know what I mean? Like, so is the upfront contract across the board, or is the upfront contract just for that call?
So the upfront contract is to establish the purpose and the outcome of that step in the sales process.
Okay.
So my initial call with most people, I try to keep under 3 minutes. No pressure prospecting call. Is there a reason for us to talk further? The answer is yes. We try to schedule a follow-up call. And I set at the end of that first call an upfront contract for what the purpose of the next call is going to be. Some of my sales processes are 2 meetings and I've got an answer. Some of them are 4, 5, 6 meetings before we have the right decision makers in the room. We've uncovered what the budget issues are. We've discovered what the fulfillment steps are, and then we finally agree to move forward. At the end of every meeting, I set an upfront contract for the next meeting. And at the start of every meeting, the follow-up meeting, I review our upfront contract from the previous meeting. So the next slide that I'm going to go through is going to answer a lot of this. When should you make an upfront contract? But I want to make sure we understand the steps in the upfront contract before we get to all of this.
Okay, sorry.
No. I mean, and you actually do this almost every week. You are asking a question from the second or third slide, and then I roll you back. And that's okay. You're on page 7. I'm on page 3. We're going to back up. We're going to talk about it, but we will get there. Deal?
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you just
So-
make an upfront contract with me?
Yeah, exactly. So 5 elements of an upfront contract. Number 1 is the purpose of the meeting. Explain why you are having the meeting. The purpose should move the selling process going forward. Okay? Be blunt. No happy ears. If you are talking to a donor, you need them to know, hey, Laurel, I really appreciate you taking time to sit down with me. I appreciate your time. The purpose of this meeting today is to discuss whether or not you will be interested in playing and getting a foursome for the golf outing. Right? No mutual mystification. Not, I'd like to talk to you about the golf outing. Not, I'd like to see if you've heard about the golf outing. The upfront contract needs to be the purpose of the meeting and what the purpose of that meeting is in the selling process. Okay? Second step, the prospect's agenda and expectations. What you're going to do in your questioning strategies is find out what the prospect's agenda is for the meeting and find out what their expectations are for the meeting. And you want to restate those to them in this meeting, so that you give them a chance to respond if you do not have their agenda and their expectations for what the outcome is. Third step, you as the salesperson, your agenda and expectations. Explain to the prospect what you will be doing in the meeting. Explain your expectations to the prospect, including what information you might need from them. And that information might be budget. That information might be decision makers. It might be timing. It might be accountability. It could be anything. But that upfront contract needs to not only define their expectations and their agenda, but your expectations and your agenda. Okay? No happy ears. We get everything out and on the table. Fourth part is simple, timing. The date, the time, the location of the meeting. And making sure that the timing isn't just we're going to meet at noon. It's going to be, I have an hour booked. Do you still have an hour? It's going to be stuff like, we are meeting at this restaurant at this time. We are having coffee. We are having a Zoom call. And the last part is the outcome. The outcome really should be the decision to proceed with or stop the selling process, or the prospect's final decision to buy or not buy. So most of you have heard me say things like, this is going to go one of 3 directions. I might not be right for you, and that's okay. You can tell me. I won't be upset. We'll shake hands. We'll part ways as friends. Or you might have heard me say something like, hey, you might not be right for me, and you have to promise me that you won't be upset with me if I say we shouldn't work together. And then the third option is we take another step moving forward and we define what that next step is. And that could be signing a contract. That could be, to getting a deposit. That could be getting a donation. All of those are kind of the outcomes that we want to have up front on there. And when I bring this up, I actually have some of this stuff scripted, where I will work with each one of you on what a 30-second commercial looks like and what an upfront contract might sound like. So the terms of an upfront contract are pretty simple. You and the prospect agree to the outcome for each stage of the contract. And that is purpose of the meeting, their agenda, your agenda, time, outcome. So slowing down. Any questions about any one of those? And we're going to go through each one of these a lot more in depth, but that's kind of the overview, the upfront. Anyone? Okay. Do you want to hear what one of my upfront contracts might sound like if I have a client that has agreed to move forward in the sales process on sales training?
Yeah.
I literally have this typed up and I rehearse it.
One question before you go through it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm so confused by this, but I mean, I'm assuming when they confirm the meeting with you, they actually hop on the phone with you. Isn't that some sort of nonverbal agreement, or you think it's always important to verbally go through it with them once they get on the call?
I'm going to say the term again, mutual mystification.
Okay.
No happy ears.
Okay.
We have a saying in Sandler that if you didn't tell the client they couldn't do it, it's your fault if they do it.
Okay.
So this upfront contract lays out everything for the next steps. So as you guys are looking at my face, but looking at this screen, purpose of the meeting, prospect's agenda, my agenda, time and outcome, see if you can keep track of all 5 of these elements as I go through my upfront contract. So what this would be is, I'll use Sarah Barnett because she's not here. We had a conversation. We talked about sales training. I asked her if there was anything that was relevant in her world. She said yes. She started sharing some of her challenges and frustrations with me. And then I moved forward with scheduling the follow-up appointment. So what I would normally say if she said, yeah, that's all relevant in my world, maybe we should talk, is I would say, look, can I make a suggestion? Let's find time for you and I to sit down and talk more about training. We'll probably need about an hour, and we'll go over this and any other issues that might be relevant. She says, yes, I can get an hour, and this sounds relevant. Then, again, I rehearse this, just to make sure we're both clear for that meeting. A couple of things may happen. First, you may realize where I'm the best fit to solve this problem, or I'm not the best fit to solve this problem, and you can tell me no, and that's fine. I won't take offense. We shake hands, we part ways as friends, continue to maybe network. Are you comfortable with that? On the other hand, after some discussion, I may realize that you're not the best fit to help me with this. And if that's true, I'll be sure to let you know. And if it's a no, you have to promise to not be upset with me. Are you comfortable with that? If neither of those things happen, we have a yes. You think I can help you, and I think I can help you with what you've needed. We decide what's next. You might have some more questions about where we might go from here. So we need to talk about what that yes means. Most likely it would mean it's time to talk budget, timing, people, fulfillment. We have to decide the next step, what the next steps look like. It could be that we need to meet again to dig further. We might need to talk about solutions I offer. We might look at investing in some assessments to see who on your team is trainable and who's ready. So just to confirm our appointment, I'll call you the day before. If there's anything that might interfere with us turning off our phones and spending a dedicated hour, please let me know. We can always reschedule. So, did I go over the purpose of the meeting?
Yeah.
Sales training, right? That's the first part there where I said, let's sit down and you and I talk more about training. We'll probably need an hour to go over any issues that might be relevant. And then the prospects agenda, did we cover that? Most likely it would mean it's time to talk budget, timing, people, fulfillment. That's my agenda. Those are my issues. That's also what we're talking to them about. We might talk about solutions that I offer, and we might look at investing in some assessments to see who on your team is trainable. That's an outcome for me. Did we talk about the time? I clearly say in every one of these as well, I've got an hour set aside. Is there anything that's going to interrupt us? Because it's sometimes when I hear somebody say, well, you know, I've got a 10:30 or Rakeem may or may not. No, we need to set aside a specific hour. Uninterrupted. We turn our phones off. Now, obviously, if it's somebody that's a physician or always on call in emergencies, we can't do that. But that timing needs to be locked down. And then the outcome is we decide at the end of that what the next step is. And that step can be a yes or it can be a no. but this really helped eliminates the I'll think it over parts of this. So, within an upfront contract, purpose, agenda and expectations from them, agenda expectations from you, time and outcome. Is there anything in there that you think you'd be uncomfortable with?
I think the prospects agenda and expectations it's kind of difficult. It's like, how do you know? Just asking them a specific question, like, what do you expect out of this meeting, kind of?
Absolutely. Laurel, absolutely. Part of what we do in our questioning strategies, and we're going to get to this when we talk about pain, is really understanding what we're trying to help them solve for. So if we don't understand what their expectations and agenda are, we don't know if we can solve for their pain. It comes again back to ethical selling. We're not just trying to sell ice to an Eskimo. We're not just trying to get a transaction. We're trying to actually solve a solution. So we need to, through our questioning strategies, understand what their agenda and expectations are, what they're trying to solve for.
So kind of like back to what Sarah was saying, this would be like having a conversation with someone about possibly training with you, and then into, oh, you want to learn more, well, let's meet at this time. And then that's when you do like, okay, the purpose of that meeting is this. After our conversation, it's obvious that you expect this and want to learn this, and that would be their agenda. And you, okay.
So think of this. When we talk about the elements of an upfront contract, we are trying to determine the purpose of the meeting. What is the purpose? Why are we there? So this is the purpose of the meeting, the phone call, the contact, the future action. What is the purpose? Why are we here?
Can I interrupt that real quick?
Absolutely.
I feel like probably for Laurel too, because usually our purpose is to get money. Is like we want you to donate in some way or another, be involved. I feel like at least me, I don't want to use the word beat around the bush, but it's more like I say things like, I want to see if you're interested in getting involved or interested in learning more, do we need to be more upfront, more direct?
Yes.
Okay.
And understand that normally this isn't the first words out of your mouth. Normally this is at the end of your first contact, your first call, where you have had that 30-second commercial to see if they're interested in getting involved, to see if they might be willing to support the mission. Then as you ask them more questions about how they might want to get involved, and you really dig on what their goals that they're trying to solve for are, that's where you can then suggest, why don't we continue this with the next meeting? And in that next meeting, we will have a conversation about, and then it's the purpose of the meeting. Okay. So if you start that with the beat around the bush, we'd like to see if you'd like to get more involved, and they say, yes, I'd like to be involved more in the golf outing, or I'd like to be involved in making a donation, or I'd like to be more involved in mentoring, then as you wrap up that phone call, you set that as the purpose for the next meeting.
Okay.
So hypothetically, if I was Olivia trying to sell Laurel on building a relationship with me to come join the golf outing as a foursome, right? I would have an upfront contract that sound something like this. So Laurel, just so I make sure we're on the same page, the purpose of our next meeting is to discuss the Wayland Center,
Whaley.
Whaley Center,
yep.
The Whaley Center golf outing, and how we can get you involved for 2020. Now, obviously, naturally, you're going to have some questions about dates, times, pricing, sponsorships, opportunities, and that's natural. And typically, I'm going to have some questions about your involvement in previous golf outings, your budget, your availability for the outing. And that's typical and that's expected. So we're going to set aside an hour. Next Wednesday, we're going to hop on a Zoom call like this. It'll be totally no distractions, no email, no cell phones. And the outcome at the end of that meeting is very simple. At the end of that meeting, you might say, hey, Olivia, thank you, but this isn't the right outing for me in 2020, and that's fine. We shake hands, we part ways as friends. You still support the Whaley Children's Center. We still appreciate all that you've done in the past. I might come back and say, hey, Laura, I'm sorry, but at this opportunity, this might not be the right opportunity for you to be involved. Maybe there's other opportunities. Maybe it's 2021. I hope you're not offended if I tell you that. But if at the end of this meeting, we actually figure out that we've answered all of your questions and we've actually found a way that we can have you involved in this year's golf outing, then at the end of that call, we will talk budget, we will talk timing, we will talk sponsorship levels, and we'll get a decision on whether or not to move forward. Does that sound okay with you? So as somebody that hasn't worked for Whaley and hasn't done golf outing calls in a long time, but for me, it's kind of cheating because I used to do them. The purpose of the meeting is to talk about the golf outing. My agenda and her agenda and expectations, sponsorship levels, exposure levels, timing, whatever it might be. My agenda and expectations, talking budget, talking timing, talking commitment, time, do a Zoom call, do it Wednesday, do it for an hour. Outcome, either it's a yes from you or no from you, a no from me, or a yes from both of us, and what that yes looks like. Because then going into this, we know that the end of that call isn't a, sounds good, let me think it over.
Yeah.
We have that upfront contract. Now, it's gonna take some getting used to, right? The happy ears that we are used to, the mutual mystification, normally just goes with, hey, it's Olivia, I'm calling to talk about the golf outing. Do you have time to talk about it right now? And then you just dump a bunch of sponsorship levels on them. You can be a cart sponsor, you can be the beer sponsor, we have this, we're looking for silent auction items. Can you let me know if any of that's interested? Okay, sounds good. You'll get back to me? Okay, thanks, bye. You'll get back to me? Okay, thanks, bye. Right? We don't want the think it overs. We don't want the sounds good, send me something, I'll take a look at it. We want to actually have a decision on what the next step is. So, purpose of the meeting, prospects, agenda and expectations, your agenda and expectations, timing and outcome. And a lot of times what you'll start to find is that these are very consistent no matter who you talk to on the product or services that you have, because you start understanding what their questions and expectations are going to be, what your questions and expectations are going to be, budget, timing, decision makers, and then the outcome can be one of three things. And in my case, under COVID, it's been, I might not be right for you, you might not be right for me. I've had to throw a fourth one in there. It might just be, no, not right now, because we're not sure what the sales staff is going to look like when we come back. Laurel will appreciate this. I've been in a lot of conversations with the Oakland University Athletic Department. They are bringing in new group sales people to sell sponsorships and ticket packages and everything else. We don't know if they're going to have a season. We don't know what basketball may or may not look like. They're not going to hire a sales staff until they know what products they can sell. If the NCAA comes out in September and says you can play, but the arenas have to be empty, there's no point in paying salespeople commissions right now to sell ticket packages that they're never going to collect them. So with Oakland and Steve Waterfield, my current meeting with him, our upfront contract is not right now. Let's talk in September. That was an approved and expected outcome in that meeting. So sometimes it's not all black and white, no from you, no from me, yes. Sometimes it's no from you, no from me, not right now, yes. Or the yes doesn't have to be, here's my check, let's move forward. The yes might be defining clearly what a next step is. Olivia, for you, that might be if you are meeting with somebody that has the opportunity to bring some sponsorship dollars in. They might say, this sounds really good, but it's not my decision to make. We need to talk to my CFO, my CEO, my whatever. The clear next step for you is then we're setting a meeting with that person. If the answer is send me some stuff over, I'll take a look at it. Well, that wasn't one of the approved outcomes. The approved outcome was we're gonna get in front of that decision maker and have them answer our questions. Sarah, you will see this a lot in corporate stuff because I deal so much in corporate stuff. As much as I would like a one meeting close where I tell you, you tell me no, I tell you no, we say yes and we move forward. It's not getting a check at that moment. It's getting the next steps and getting the right people there. So a couple real quick things on this. When we determine the purpose of the meeting or the future action, every contact with a prospect should have a specific purpose. And ideally that purpose is to move forward in the selling process. So again, sometimes it's getting the check and getting the investment right there. Sometimes it's getting to the next step in the process. Getting that clear, defined next step is what's very important. We're going to talk about budget. If I say that our opening sponsorship level is $10,000, and that person says, we budgeted 5. That's a no. That's fine. We close the file, we move on. Okay? Every one of these steps is in the process. So when we determine the prospect's agenda for this meeting and their expectations of us before the meeting, this always needs to be done before you define your agenda and expectations. Always go over them first, right? Not only does this protect you from being blindsided during the meeting, it also contributes to building the trust and rapport with the prospect. This is especially true if the prospect suffers from a fear of being ambushed by salespeople. So getting back to DISC analysis, S's, steady relators that need to build trust by giving them the chance or kind of redetermining what you expect their agenda and expectations to be before you tell them yours. If you're wrong, they can interrupt you and correct you. Now you're not blindsiding them, and as you move to that next step, you can actually make sure that you're verifying it. So again, I just threw out that golf outing one. And if I said, Laurel, and I'm assuming that you're gonna have questions about the timing of the event, budgets for sponsorship levels, and timing of, the profiles of the golfers. Is that correct? Laurel might interrupt me and go, no, I need to know if there's any of my competitors that are there. I'm sick of going to golf outings and being the 10th realtor sponsoring a hole. It gives them a chance that if you make sure you're going to go through their agenda, that it gives them a chance to share it with you. Again, especially with steady relators, give them a chance to give you feedback and build the trust first before you go over your agenda. Yes, Sarah.
So have you ever come to a situation where you've actually, you've been working with someone for several months, you think the process is taking longer, but corporate, sometimes takes longer, and you get to the end and you make agreements along the way, and those agreements weren't necessarily truthful. I don't think they were lying, but misleading. So for example, we had worked with a company, and we had started negotiations back and forth. And so the woman that we started the negotiation with delegated it to someone else within the organization, okay? We're getting micro commitments, we're moving the bus along, right? And then all of a sudden she steps back in and says, I don't know if this is really what we want to commit to. And we're now like 4 or 5, 6 months into this. So eventually the commitments that we got from the person she delegated to were not the commitments that she was willing to give us. She pulled back the reins right away, and in order to kind of salvage the relationship and make it seem like, we were interested in a long-term relationship versus, the immediate benefits, we just said we're going to hold tight for now. If and when you're ready, let us know. We'll follow up with you in 6 months just to see where you're at. So I guess my question is, it's not meant to be black or white. That's probably a bad example in our current world. But have you ever gotten to the point where you look back and you're like, I got the micro commitments along the way. We made kind of that upfront contract, and then you realize that there's things that you couldn't have controlled that would have made it unavoidable that you would have landed in the circumstance that you're in.
So remember how I say you're normally on page 7 and I'm normally on page 3? You're on slide 77.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But it's a great question. So if you look at the Sandler submarine, okay, we've talked about bonding and rapport. This is the parent, the child, parent, adult stuff.
Okay.
This is the tonality. This is the physiology. This is the DISC analysis, right? The second step of this is the upfront contract. And the upfront contract is what we say ahead of time as we go through the sales process. So one thing that you're going to have in that upfront contract going forward, no mutual mystification. You're going to say stuff like, we're going to talk about timing, we're going to talk about budget, we're going to talk about decision making. And when you talk to them about decision making, this is actually this step here, pain, budget, decision, fulfillment. If you have in your upfront contract to talk about decision making and she says, yes, this is my decision, this is my department, this is what I'm doing, and you clearly define what that micro next step is and who's the decision maker on it. If she tries to delegate it back to somebody else, you can review the upfront contract and say, no, I'm sorry, Sarah. The one thing that we had agreed to when we went into this was that this was your decision to make. And so while we can bring other people in, you really need to take the lead on this and let me know where we stand with this. When we get to the fulfillment part, you clearly will define in future upfront contracts what fulfillment looks like, and that's what they're committing to. And is there a purchasing department? Is there a committee? Is, you know, all this kind of stuff. The ultimate upfront contract at the very end of this, the UUFC ultimate upfront contract, when you actually say, this is the price, this is the commitment, this is the terms, this is, you know, how you're moving forward, yes or no. Don't think of it as you're just going to have one upfront contract throughout this. You might have 10 different upfront contracts. We're just trying to give you a high level of what an upfront contract is and what the first one might look like. So, great questions. Enterprise selling is a lot harder. It can be a lot harder. But by getting some of this stuff in there, we can hold her accountable as we go forward on what she committed to or what we are willing to commit to. And if that's the case, we can absolutely just tell them, hey, sorry, you're not right for me. I'm closing the file and I'm moving on. Sounds good, Sarah, but I'm not sure we're ready to commit. Well, we had an upfront contract and said you would or you wouldn't commit. I'm going to close the file and I'm going to move on. Because again, this kind of goes back to the whole thing about get a yes or get a no, but don't chase. No's can be very good. Again, the whole 49 rules of Sandler, we will go through some of these about, you know, the successes of getting a no and learning from them. And how some of what we do is to get a no so we can close the file and move on. Okay, can I go back? Couple weeks worth of slides. And Sarah, I know that I'm picking on you a little bit, but great questions. Keep them coming because I know that you are thinking in these enterprise situations and I don't want you to have cloudiness on it. I want you to get clarity. No mutual mystification. Don't hear what you want to hear. Ask for clarity. Okay? So we stopped at prospects, agenda, and expectations. We want to get them to answer first so that we can build trust with them, that we are not getting blindsided and we're not going to blindside them. Third part is, if we define our prospect's agenda or define our agenda for the meeting and our expectations with the prospect, we can be clear, we can be specific in our requests to what the prospect is going to answer for questions or other information. It is our responsibility to transform a prospect's wishy-washy responses into specific committed answers. So, you know what an equivocation is? Okay, an equivocation. Everyone knows what yes looks like. Everyone knows what no looks like. The equivocation is everything in between. We want to get very specific yes or no answers. So my upfront contract, when I'm going over my agenda and expectations, will say stuff like, Laurel, we're going to talk about budget. I'm going to need to know if you have budget set aside. I'm going to need to know whose responsibility it is for spending that budget or approving that budget. And I'm going to need to know if you can afford our projects. Can you bring your budget numbers to this meeting? Sarah, you might say, if you're talking about corporate wellness that's dealing with an existing carrier, something to the effect of, you have an existing client or vendor relationship. I need to know when that contract expires or if there's any terms of in the contract with an out clause. Olivia, Laurel, again, you might say to something to them like, we're going to have to talk about the donation. We're going to have to talk about the sponsorship. We're going to have to talk about how much might be set aside and who actually controls that budget and has the ability to say yes. Because if they go, oh yeah, budget's not an issue. That's not a yes or a no. Budget's not an issue could mean, I have no budget. Budget's not an issue. We don't have any, right?
Yeah.
We want to look at getting rid of the gray and the wishy-washy and getting to specific yes or no's. And these are committed yes or no's, okay? As far as the timing, determine the date, location of the meeting, as well as the amount of time to be spent in the meeting. Again, err on the side of giving too much time and too little time. I normally set an hour for most of my meetings, but when it actually comes down to I'm setting the meeting, I normally ask for at least 90 minutes. So that way, if we get done early, I can say, hey, we just gave you 30 minutes of your day back. If there's something that they need more information on, I can wait for them to get that information. hey, we were going to talk budget and you didn't bring your budget numbers. Is there somebody you can call and get those so we can make a decision on whether or not we should schedule the follow-up meeting? These are conversations that have to be had. So Aaron, too much rather than not enough. And I say really specific things in mine, like, great, I'm religious about my Outlook calendar. If you give me an email address, I'll send an invite over. And is it the best phone number for you? Is there a cell phone I can reach you at if you're not in the office? The last thing that you want to do, Laurel, is say, okay, I'll call you on Thursday if that works for you. And they go, yeah, sure, Thursday's good. What number? What time? How much time do they need? If they're in the office and you don't get a hold of them, is there a cell you can reach them on? All this stuff matters. Be very specific about it. And I can even share with you guys my whole script that I put together. If somebody goes, yeah, it sounds good. Let's talk next week. This one I do all the time. Oh, great. Next week, I have my calendar open. Let me run a few times by you. Do these work for you? Wednesday at 1, Thursday at 2. Don't leave the next step in the sales funnel open to a, sounds good, we'll talk next week. Get a specific date and time and get it on the calendar. If it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. And then the last part, determining the expected outcome of the meeting. The end result will usually be a decision to proceed with the next step in the selling process or to stop, to identify whether or not there's a purchase or a donation in there. And those are both good outcomes.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In fundraising, a lot of fundraisers will tell you that it could take anywhere from like 6 months to like 2 years to build a relationship with a donor before you ask them for money. Is this kind of like shortening that or like eliminating that time frame, I guess?
It's not eliminating the time frame. It's eliminating the guesswork of what the ultimate outcome is. If you just want to be nice to them and do friend raising rather than fundraising, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you actually want to start having conversations with them that say stuff like, you know, we are interested in expanding our donor network. We'd like to get you a little more information about the school. I'd like to invite you to this mass to be a part of our community. And then I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting with you to discuss whether you'd like to financially support the school. You know, stuff like that is where you can get a lot more clarity on your purpose of dealing with them and prepare you for that no, or getting the no early so that you don't spend 6 months cultivating them only to get them to blow you off.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Laurel, you will go forward with this with some very clear expectations as you ask questions. We're looking for a gift for our annual fund. One time, right? One-time gift. We are looking for people to consider us for a legacy donation. Okay, that's a little specific. Now we're going to have to talk about your mortality and when you die, are you giving us money, right? Event sponsorships, silent auction donations, capital gifts, sponsorships, job opportunities. All of these could be potential outcomes. But if you leave it at a high level of the purpose of us getting together is to teach you a little bit more about the school, to see if maybe you'd be willing to invest in our mission going down the line, you need to get that up front. And most of us know and respect the fact that if you get it up front early and often, we're not going to feel like you're going to try to ambush us with an envelope as we leave the room.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like at Oakland and a lot of what I was taught to fundraise, corporate fundraising was, let me invite you to have a conversation with me to learn about what Oakland's doing about diversity and inclusion and how you can get involved. And a lot of times it would turn into, oh, we have volunteers. Like we're looking to ask for, or we want to ask for money. And as a corporate donor, like they know that, but maybe they don't want to give money. They rather give like volunteer hours. So, or whatever. Instead of like upfront and saying like, we're looking for corporate partners to donate to our diversity and inclusion programs at Oakland. Would you be interested in doing that?
So when you go through the prospect's agenda and expectations, you need to make sure you touch on those. So we're going to get to ANOT in a minute. And you might say something like, naturally you're going to have questions about how your corporation can get involved. These might be through service hours. This might be through volunteering. This might be through corporate scholarships. This might be through sponsorships. This may even be through grants.
So that's their agenda. And then they'll tell you if that's it or not.
Could be.
And then your agenda would be what? Like we're looking for people.
So as you had the initial call, maybe the prospect's agenda and expectations are you're interested in looking at ways that you can get more involved with some volunteers. Okay? That's fine. That's their agenda. Your agenda might be, and obviously I'm going to touch on ways that you guys can get more involved with volunteers, but I'd also like to discuss if there are any opportunities with corporate matching donations, employee contributions, sponsorships, foundations.
Yeah.
You can put that in there, because again, the final outcome might be getting a yes or getting a no from you or getting a no from them. Your questioning strategies as we go through stuff in the funnel, like, I just need to bookmark the submarine for you guys. As we go over pain, as we go over budget, as we go over decision-making, there will be more specific upfront contracts within each one of those.
Right. So when I'm initially thinking about so bonding and rapport is when you talk about what you're selling, correct? Or like learning about them and talking about what you're selling and how it might align with a problem they're trying to solve.
That's how we begin the conversation.
And then it turns into this upfront contract. Okay, you're interested in this. Well, let's set up a time to talk about that.
So when I do my upfront contract and I say stuff that sounds like, so we need to talk about what yes means. Most likely it would mean it's time to talk budget, timing, and fulfillment. We have to decide what the next steps look like at that point. So when I say all that, it means that we are going to be talking about money. We are going to be talking about timing. We're going to be talking about who actually is the decision maker and all this stuff. So this initial phone call is not to get them to tell you what their budget is and how much they're willing to spend. This upfront contract with your agenda and expectations is your way of saying, the next time we talk, we're going to talk about money.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about decision makers. We're going to talk about timing. We're going to talk about what you're getting at. The terms of this contract are easy to remember. Both you and the prospect must agree to the outcome for the stage of the contract. And again, these could have several different meetings going down each step of the sales funnel. You can get a no at any one of these. We would like you to contribute to our Catholic mission. Well, Laurel, I appreciate your time, but we don't do any religious organizations. Good to get that now and close the file and move on, than to spend 6 months chasing them only to find out, oh, you didn't know we were a religious institution and you don't contribute to religious institutions? It's some tough love in there. I apologize, but this is really where we want to make sure that we're covering what your agenda is, and that might be something that you talk about. So the whole point of this that I keep trying to drive home is that you guys are both reading off the same sheet of music. No mutual mystification, no happy ears. There's no one-sided contracts. This upfront contract for you is not private, that you're keeping your cards close to the vest and this is a wish list for your meeting. It's an agreement from both sides in concrete terms of what will take place and the role that each of us is playing in this. Okay? I'm not trying to be a hard ass on this, but I just really want you guys to know how important this is. Because again, if the client does something you didn't tell them they couldn't do, that's on you. So a strong upfront contract with one is very specific, defines the elements that we've covered. A strong upfront contract serves both the salesperson as the prospect. It gives us both a chance to say no. And we eliminate that whole mutual mystification, the happy ears. We get rid of unfulfilled expectations and misunderstandings. What's left? We're still in control. We get a yes. We get a no. We close the file and move on. We get clarity. We get specifics. We get mutual understanding. That's the big value of the upfront contract.
So remember how you told me a couple weeks ago that companies that we may be trying to work with don't know that they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know if they need what we have. So how does that work with an upfront contract where they don't necessarily know what I have? They've committed to a call to talk about budget. They've, their overall, but where's the gap between they don't know what you need and, it probably requires more conversations and versus they're not ready for it right now and there's red flags that they're not the right fit? Is it just micro commitments again?
Don't think of micro commitments. Think of the submarine.
Okay.
Right? So when we set this upfront contract and what our agenda is, things that we're going to talk about are their pain, and their pain is what they're trying to solve for.
Okay.
So when you talk to somebody about and we're going to go through a whole thing on questioning strategies. Tell me more about that. Can you be more specific? Can you give me an example of that? How long has this been a problem for you? How much do you think this has cost you? These are the kind of questions that you're going to go through at that next meeting. And if you've set in your upfront contract that your agenda is to uncover issues that they're having, concerns they're having, you guys have heard my whole 30-second commercial where I talk about stuff like having trouble prospecting, having trouble getting yeses or nos in the sales process taking too long, looking at trading dollars for deals, not sticking to your bottom line, screwing up your commissions. Is anything like that relevant in your world? That's part of my introductory no pressure prospecting call. That's part of the first part of this. And as they say something like, yeah, Chris, we're really having trouble finding new opportunities, I'll go through those questioning strategies. Tell me more about that. What have you tried to do? I'll get some of those questions out of the way so I can know what questions I need to ask them for the follow-up meeting. And then I close for that meeting with a upfront contract. Sarah, it really sounds like there might be something deeper for us to have this future conversation on. If I can make a recommendation, why don't we set a follow-up meeting? Why don't we set aside an hour? And then I go through the purpose of your agenda, my agenda, timing, and outcome. Then when we get into that meeting and I tell you we're going to talk about stuff like budget, we're going to talk about what we're trying to solve for, they know that we're going to be asking those questions in the next meeting. Okay. I want to make sure that you are aware that everything that you've asked, it's coming. And I think some of it helps too as well, because as you are a lot more big picture on this, I think Laura and Olivia are trying to see, oh, that's why we're talking about this, because there are more questions coming. There are more chapters coming.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm being impatient.
No, and here's the thing. Soon we're going to start practicing making upfront contracts. But before you can do that, you have to plan for the upfront contract by kind of filling out an upfront contract online, like really defining what your specific information that you need to cover and what the 5 elements that you're going to go over are going to be. When you kind of create this outline and you write these things down on what you want to say or points you want to make prior to talking to the prospect, you're really planning for that next meeting with the prospect. And you may even want to have, this is something else I've done. I have not only a script, I have a worksheet that helps remind me of what my pain questions are. I have my upfront contract right there. So as I'm on this call, I write down what each part of these are. When I talk about budget, I have it in there. Like, I'm going to work with you guys on building all these, but we have to teach you the high level points of it before we can build your individual ones. Because obviously, if Sarah Barnett was here, she has very specific questions when it comes to technology about budgets, contract terms, decision makers. Is she dealing with the IT director? Is she dealing with the CFO? Is she dealing with the purchasing department? Is there a 3-bid process? Laurel, dealing with grants, is going to have a lot different decision makers than Olivia is going to have for a private person trying to decide whether or not to play in a golf outing than you're going to have dealing with a corporate wellness HR representative, right? So we are going to build these together, but we're just doing the high level, high overview right now. Okay, so again, soon we will practice building these together. And then my favorite thing in the world, because I like watching you all squirm, we're going to role play them. and we're going to have to practice sharing them with each other. So if we go through this and you have, you know, the purpose of the meeting, your agenda, the timing, and the outcome, and you didn't remember the client's agenda, we need to fix that. There's a method to this madness. It all works. Okay? So now getting back to what Sarah asked about 37 minutes ago. The next slide. When should an upfront contract be used? So on the phone with a prospect prior to the first meeting. Anytime you're going to have a meeting with a prospect, and you're starting that meeting. Beginning each step in the Sandler submarine. At the conclusion of the sale, and this conclusion can be to discuss add-on businesses, future business, or referrals, and then just in general at the conclusion of every meeting. So let me kind of go back to this part on the phone with a prospect. I do a lot of no pressure prospecting calls. I was on the Java with Gene call this morning for the Auburn Hills Chamber. There were 4 different people on there that I'd never met before that I'm going to connect to on LinkedIn, that I'm going to set a meeting with on their calendar to get to know them for networking. And in there, I'm going to give them my 30-second commercial and say, I work for Sandler Training. We do sales training. We train salespeople and sales managers. Typically, I work with 1 of 3 types of business. And I'll go through my whole strong book of business, having trouble prospecting, yada, 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 yada. And at the end of that, if I say, is any of that relevant in your world? Hopefully that's when they go, yeah, actually, Chris, under COVID, we're really not being able to go to networking meetings. We're not talking enough meeting. We're really having trouble prospecting. So I'll ask them some follow-up questions. How do you feel about that? What have you done to try to fix it? How much does it cost you? If they start going down there, that's when I will stop them and drop in my 30-second commercial and ask for a follow-up meeting. And that's when I'll do an upfront contract there. And that's when they've said, Chris, we're having trouble prospecting. I will go through that. Yes, let's book a meeting. And again, so just to make sure we're both clear on that meeting, a couple of things may happen. First, you realize where I'm not the best fit to resolve this problem, and you tell me no, and that's fine. I won't take offense. We shake hands. We part ways as friends. Continue to maybe network. The other hand, after some discussion, I may realize that you're not the best benefit for us. If that's true, you know, this whole no pressure prospecting call, I end each one of those calls with a 30-second with a no pressure. With an upfront contract that we clearly define the purpose of the next call and what we're going to cover on the next call and the outcome of that call. So again, it depends on the industry, who I'm talking to. I have this script and it's a loose script, but I might say stuff like, typically you're going to want to know about other types of technology companies we worked with, some of the solutions we brought to them, maybe how much they've paid for us to do their training, what the training looks like, whether it's face-to-face or it's remote. That's the kind of stuff that I'm going to have in that after that phone call with a prospect. My goal is to get off the phone in under 15 minutes with an agreement that we're going to meet for an hour and actually talk about each step of this. And here's the other thing. At the start of every meeting, I review that upfront contract. Can you think of why I might want to review that at the start of every meeting?
To remind them what you agreed on.
Yeah. What if something's changed? What if they talk to their business partner and their business partner said, hey, you know what? I'm already talking to a guy. Don't waste your time. What if they've actually had a bigger issue come up? So you thought you were talking to them, Laurel, about an annual fund gift, and now grandma's sick and they got to find something for their will and trust. You never know. So anytime you're going to have a meeting with a prospect, you want to make sure that you review that contract up front before the meeting starts. And you review it before any meeting or contact you have with them. Just think about it. What happens if you don't have an upfront contract before a meeting or presentation? What could happen? You and the prospects have conflicting expectations. Your upfront contract for your agenda and outcome is different than their upfront contract for their agenda and outcome. Here's the other thing that happens a lot of times. And this happened to me back in my old sales days, especially when I was doing websites. I would go in there expecting to talk timing, budget, expectations. And the person would sit there with their folded arms and go, oh, I thought you were going to show me some samples of what our new website would look like. You wanted me to take a team of designers and spend 50 hours doing design, branding, and custom work on spec in the 48 hours since we last talked? Like, you really thought this meeting was going to be me coming in here going, here's 3 examples, pick the best? No. You have to clearly define what the expectations are, because if you walk into that meeting expecting to ask a lot of questions and they're expecting a presentation and a quote, it's going to catch you really off guard. And here's the other one, especially for Dr. Sarah and for Sarah Barnett. If you don't define clearly what your expectation is for the meeting and what you're going after, it may turn into a lot of free consulting. They're going to ask a lot of questions, which are fine. But if they're just asking for free consulting and free information and you're spilling your candy all over the lobby, they're not going to be upfront and honest with you for what the expectation of the meeting is. They might just be trying to get a quote out of you to compare to their competitors. They might just be trying to get a quote out of you to take to their current vendor and beat them up on price. That meeting, every meeting has to have an upfront contract to kick off the meeting. And now this gets back to Sarah's question. These, what'd you call them? Micro steps?
Micro commitments.
Micro commitments. If every one of these micro commitments you look at as a step in the Sandler submarine, where you're going to actually talk pain to understand what they're trying to solve for, that could be its own upfront contract for what we're going to talk about in this. And it's going to be current efforts that you're doing, current wellness programs, biggest concerns that you're having, future pain, future pleasure with the staff. Could be in that stuff. So you get to the end of that, where you've made a decision that says something to the effect of, at the end of this meeting, I might realize that you might realize that my corporate wellness program isn't right for you, and that's fine. We'll shake hands and part ways as friends. Or at the end of this meeting, I might decide that while you guys do need a good corporate wellness program, I might not be the right solution for you, and that's okay. We'll continue as friends and networking partners. But if at the end of this we decide that I am the right fit to try to just solve for your corporate wellness needs, then we have to have the next step to actually talk about budgets and how much money is available and whose money that is to spend and who's the decision maker in that process and how you actually do your purchasing.
Companies usually give that information out freely, or do they expect you to say, who usually gives price first?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. Can you say it again?
Who usually gives price first? So far we've had an issue with people throwing out what their budget is. Like most people just don't say we've got $25,000 a month to play with. And then the last question's like, how much is your program, or how do we negotiate? And then we get stuck in the weeds because they don't want to overshare. Is that a dumb question? Budget?
No.
People don't it's kind of like, when you go out on a date, right? Usually, Laurel and Olivia might be too young for this, but like you kind of get the non-negotiables off the table, right? Like if you want, you know what I mean? Sometimes that comes a little bit later in the dating process when you're younger. As you get older, right? There's a lot of non-negotiables. Budget seems to be one where it's like, how much rapport do I have to build with you for us actually to be at the point where we can start talking about these things?
Okay. So it's a good question. You're on chapter 5. We're on chapter 3.
Cool. All right.
Okay. And so I will just give you a quick peek behind the curtain of the stuff that we will talk about. When it comes to budget, there are specific questions I'm going to teach you. Do you have a line item in the budget this year for your sales training? And how much is it? No, we don't. Sometimes they'll go, yeah, it's $100,000 this year. If they go, yeah, but I'm not sure what it is. Okay, is it your budget to spend, or is it part of a bigger budget that might be spent on other things? Or then we try to transition to stuff like, okay, do you have a range in mind for what you might want to spend? And if they don't have that, then you can actually give out some examples of third-party solutions. Similar clients, our training for them has been somewhere between $500 and or $50,000 and $100,000, or $1,000 to $2,000. You know, with sponsorship for a golf outing, do you have a number in mind? No, we really don't. Okay, if I told you that our current sponsorship levels were between $1,000 and $5,000, would that number scare you? Sometimes we'll go, oh God, I can't afford it. Or they go, oh, that's it? Okay, we can talk. There's a whole questioning strategy how you work your way backwards on that in chapter 5.
Cool.
Okay.
I'll just writing my questions down. How's that?
No, because I think by me giving you the answer that we are going to get to that, and that is absolutely part of the questioning strategies and how we do things, it reassures you that each one of these weeks is so important because it all builds on itself, and that this system is truly that a system, and we're going to get to it.
Cool.
Especially as I'm going to try to remind Laurel that if she goes to her in-house constituents, she has upfront contracts and stuff like this. She can actually ask budget numbers. How much would you need for this program? Oh, I don't know. If I told you there were grants available between $5,000 and $10,000, would that meet your needs? Oh my God, you can get me $5,000? That's amazing. Now they're motivated. Now they're engaged. Only 10 grand. This is a 100 grand program. Close the file. It's a no. Move on. This is all coming. These are all good questions. You're just very much ahead of the curve on me. Okay. So getting back to what I was saying, anytime you have a meeting and then beginning of each step of the Sandler submarine, not a Sandlerine. I don't know what that word is. The Sandler submarine.
Kind of like it.
Sandlerine? Sounds like a sandwich in an Italian restaurant. And part of this too is anytime you're beginning with the steps of Sandler, it's very important because again, it forces them to actually discuss their pain, their budget, their fulfillment, and gives you the chance to ask questions without having to give free consulting. And again, if you clarify with them that you will be asking these questions, it lets them know, going back to what we originally said, stuff about don't speak unless spoken to, don't ask people how much they make, don't talk about money. If you foreshadow that you're going to be talking about money or who's the decision maker, it lets them know that they will be on the spot and that these are specific questions that you will be asking and expect answers to. All right. So last thing is at the conclusion of a sale, you will have an upfront contract that for me, like these guys I'm bringing on this week, or I anticipate, the conclusion of them moving forward is that also every additional employee that you bring on, I expect we have a similar conversation what the relationship is going forward and how we're going to do their training. It gives me a post-sell or a future sell opportunity. Especially, Sarah, as you say, we're moving forward with this corporate wellness program. Now you might say, you know, at the conclusion of this, we might even want to get into conversations on corporate retreats, on-site care. It could be anything. Olivia, you might take it from at the conclusion of the golf outing, we're going to put you in our donor and our vendor list and really, you know, thank you for moving forward and let you know that there's other opportunities to support the mission going forward. So at the start of every meeting, at the conclusion of every meeting, no matter when it's a step in the sub, you have to have an upfront contract. These upfront contracts are essential tools for maintaining what? Control. We want to and we need to be in control. It allows us to control all phases of the selling process. And if you establish this upfront contract with every prospect before every contact, whether it's face-to-face or a quick conversation, no mutual mystification, no happy ears, no hearing what you want to hear. And we'll discuss later on what happens if they don't fulfill their part of the contract. Okay, let me see what else we should. Good stuff. I'll get to that in a minute. Here's some quick examples and just what we can discuss in certain situations. So imagine the situation, Laurel, say you're meeting with a CFO of a corporation, okay? And during this meeting, you learn that No, I'm sorry. So you're not meeting with the CFO. You've done your upfront contract. You're expecting to talk budget. And during that meeting with, say, the PR director, the corporate relations manager, some mid-level manager that is responsible for dealing with nonprofits like yours. And during that meeting, you learn that the prospect has to verify with the CFO the availability of the funds that might be earmarked for this project or this grant. You can't proceed until he confirms this. So what do?
You set up a time or like a deadline?
You set up another meeting. Set up another meeting. Part of that upfront contract meeting should specify that the prospect will what?
Meet with the CFO. And
Talk with the CFO. By when?
well, by the meeting, right?
Before the start of the next meeting. Right? You can even take it a step further. How about you have an upfront contract that doesn't schedule the next meeting? How about I'm the Detroit Cristo Ray person and you're the corporate relations person. Hey, Laurel, just so I can make myself clear, we're going to need you to talk to the CFO before we try to meet next Thursday at 1 o'clock. So can we do this? Can you find out by Wednesday and can you give me a call and let me know whether or not we should even have that meeting?
And then, so the expectation is that if they call you Wednesday, is that something that you, like another sort of scheduling thing, or you just hope that they do it?
Well, what I normally will include as well is like, I don't know if I sent any of you, I know I sent Dr. Sarah the survey that kind of breaks down some sales questions. What I would normally do is if I have a sales call to follow up on that survey with somebody, and I'm worried that they're going to just kind of say, yeah, send it to me, I'll get back to you. And then I schedule the follow-up meeting for next Wednesday. I'll say something effective. So Laurel, if I can ask permission, if I don't have that survey by Wednesday, there's really no reason for us to meet on Thursday. If I don't have that survey back by Wednesday, can I have permission to call you and remind you to finish the survey, or we have to reschedule the meeting at that time? Upfront contract. Either you get me the schedule or the survey by Wednesday, or we're not doing the meeting. So these mini upfront contracts, not the big ultimate upfront contract, can be very important. The only way a meeting can go is as planned is by planning before you go to the meeting. And planning takes all the parties involved. So it is the upfront contract that makes all these activities of a meeting manageable and measurable, and the end result favorably predictable. One of the biggest confrontations I ever had in a sales meeting was with a super high D. This guy was a fill in the blank, whatever negative word you would want to call a guy. He was obnoxious, he was rude, he was pushy. I had an upfront contract with him that I was actually going in there to meet with him on this, and he sent his administrative assistant in and said, X person can't make the meeting today. I'm here to take notes on your presentation. This isn't a presentation. This is a fact-finding mission with this guy. I drove out here 45 minutes for this meeting and he didn't show up. I called him, read him the riot act. I told him he wasted my time and he lacked integrity. Everything that you shouldn't do for a high D, I pushed him into a corner before I finally said, fine, you better be out here next week and we're going to talk about this. And I got the meeting and I eventually got the sale. In hindsight, biggest pain in the ass client I've ever had. I should have just walked away at that point. But 20 grand's 20 grand, so I stuck with it. So this measurable, manageable activities really help making sure that we touch all of our bases ahead of time. So again, Dr. Sarah, getting to your questioning strategies, if you know that you've now uncovered pain and you're going to come up with a solution for them, or you're going to set the next meeting to talk about their budget, you need to know that they've talked to the CFO to find out what the budget is. You need to confirm with them the day prior, hey, just to make sure you got the budget, right? We're talking numbers. Olivia, just to make sure you checked your calendar, you're available to be on site that day. Olivia, just to make sure you've looked at your needs for your grant and you've discovered what you need, right? All of this is very important.
I think my first initial thoughts with all this with being like very upfront and blunt and I guess overly communicating expectations and things like that. I feel like depending on who you talk to, people will either really, really like that or be really, really turned off by it.
Going back to the DISC analysis, there will be part of how you present it. And your agenda and their agenda might be different based on if you're dealing with a high C, your agenda might go over, we're going to talk specifically about the data, the numbers, the fulfillment. If you're dealing with a high I, it might be about, we're going to talk about how this meets your company's needs, how it addresses your corporate feelings, wellness, you know, there's part of it in there. But just imagine these situations. So say you arrive at a meeting and the prospect expects a presentation and you can't oblige this request. You have not determined what the prospect's needs and wants are. That's why you're there for that meeting. If you have this upfront contract that says the next meeting is to uncover your goals and wants and needs, you're on the same page. Another example is kind of the opposite. The prospect just keeps asking you questions. They want free consulting from you, Sarah. Prospect asks you a lot of questions about your products or your services or your treatment or your wellness, but does not allow you to ask any questions to uncover their problem or needs. If you make an upfront contract with this prospect, it keeps you from falling into this trap. Okay? So making the upfront contract with the prospect prior to a meeting allows you to avoid these problems because you and the prospect agreed to exactly what will take place during that meeting. It really prevents both of you and the prospect from wasting each other's time. So now here's where we're going to actually start working on your upfront contracts. And there's a term that we use for this. It's called ANOT. Write this down. ANOT stands for appreciate, naturally, obviously, and typically. ANOT is an acronym. So here's how I would use ANOT in a really, really, really quick upfront contract. So I'd say something like, all right, Sarah, I appreciate your invitation to meet with me about your annual corporate wellness needs. Naturally, you're going to have some questions for me about cost, about effectiveness, about care, about delivery. And obviously, I'll need to ask you some questions as well about maybe your budget, your existing relationships, your current contracts, the timing of when you're going to want to move forward with this. And typically this will go in one of three ways. And then I'll go through the no from you, no from me, yes, and what it looks like. So that ANOT is really a useful method to jog your memory because within the acronym, it's consistent with the 5 elements of the upfront contract that we taught earlier. Okay? So I appreciate the invitation to meet. It thanks them. If you thank the prospect for the meeting and verify the time and the purpose, it really helps break that ice. So, Laurel, I really appreciate you setting aside this hour for us to sit down. Does an hour still work for you? And this gives us a chance to talk about our current needs, current vendors. So this ANOT acronym for the upfront contract. Thanks the prospect for the meeting, verifies the time and the purpose. Date and the time of the meeting as well as the amount of time set aside. States the purpose for the meeting. So Olivia, this could sound something like, Olivia, I really appreciate your invitation to meet with me about the annual golf outing for the Whaley Children's Center. I've got about an hour set aside for us today. Does an hour still work for you? Okay, thank them, appreciate them, verify the purpose of the meeting, talk about the Children's Center, verify the timing of the meeting. The end part, the naturally, this is the kind of information the prospect may want from you. And when you do that naturally, it kind of gives that third-party relevance, like you've done this before. You've talked to other people like this before. The naturally part really makes that third-party stories that you might have to share come together. So naturally, this kind of information the prospect may want from you, including, and this is where I'm going to ask you to write this down. The naturally is going to be stuff like, your company or your nonprofit's background. It could be the type of companies that you've worked with before that you've helped. It could be the products or services that your company offers. And it could be the types of results that clients have experienced by using your products or services. So my ANOT statement when I kick off a meeting, normally after I go through that whole appreciate thing, I'm going to say stuff like, naturally, you're going to have a lot of questions about Sandler Training and kind of who we are and what we do. And you're also going to want to know about other businesses within your industry of nonprofits that we've helped before. And you're going to want to know whether this is face-to-face training or this is on site, if this is boot camps, if this is courses. And you're also going to know about some of the results that we've had with nonprofits and how we've been able to help them in the past. That's a good naturally statement. And this will be your homework. I will send you this outline that you guys fill out and bring next week so we can practice them. Obviously, I'll need to ask you some questions as well. This obviously rips off the Band-Aid that we're going to talk about stuff that is on our agenda. This is going to be stuff like their company background, the types of companies that they work with, and the main issues that they are facing when it comes to the issue. So if I was talking to Laurel, I would say something like, Laurel, and obviously I'm going to need to ask some questions as well. History of Detroit Cristo Rey, your leadership, your board, the organization of your advancement department. We're going to want to talk about some of the past training you might have given your team before when it comes to fundraising. And we're really going to want to talk about what issues you might be facing, whether it's an annual fund or prospecting or really just getting
Tucker, did I
grants.
write that down?
That's a naturally statement, and then that's an obviously statement for me. And then typically the way this will go is ... Really, it's two ways. The prospect says it's not a fit, or we say it's not a fit. A, it's not a fit, or B, we decide what the next step is. So the prospect decides there's no fit. Tell the prospect you want them to be comfortable. Stay there. If that's not the case, tell the prospect that it's a good fit and we move forward. So that's where I would follow up with. Typically, Laurel, the way that this will go is one of three ways. You guys may realize that Sandler Training isn't the right solution for what Detroit Cristo Rey needs, and that's fine. We'll continue to stay friends. We'll network on LinkedIn. We'll see each other at Oakland University alumni events. No harm. We shake hands. We move on as friends. Or Laurel, I might decide, you know what? Detroit Cristo Rey isn't the right client for me, or not the right solution that I can provide for what you need. And I hope you promise that you won't get offended if I tell you that. Do you promise me you won't get offended? Or if there is a solution that you need help for and my company offers it, well, then we have to figure out what that next step is. So we're going to schedule a follow-up meeting where we actually talk about who on your team can be trained, who on your team needs to be trained, if they're trainable, how much money you might have set aside for them, and what the timing might be around things like fiscal years, school years, or budgets. So that ANOT statement covered all 5 aspects of the upfront contract. It thanks them. It gives them the third-party comfort of the naturally. It breaks down some of the things that we might be afraid to ask about, like money, when we say stuff like, obviously, we're going to need to talk about budgets, timing, existing contracts. And then the typically foreshadows one of the 3 solutions. No from you, no from me, or what a yes looks like and how we would define what the next steps are.
I have a question about as far as the obviously. So in that case, we would be asking for their background, maybe their past giving experiences with other nonprofits. But how would we bring up bluntly, but not like offensively, like how much they can afford to give, like their personal budget.
Okay, and this is where I want to call you, Sarah, because you're now further down the road, right? And I mean it as a compliment. You're thinking the big picture, okay? When I do an obviously for you and a naturally, obviously we're going to want to talk about some nonprofits that you've supported in the past. Obviously, we're going to want to talk about, you know, some of the contributions you have made to other nonprofits and what you were looking for getting back from them as a partner. Obviously, we're going to talk about, you know, your support of missions like ours and how you see yourself supporting it. Obviously, we're going to want to talk about things like what budgets might be set aside to support nonprofits, and if we're going to be looking at a single gift or if you're looking at multiple gifts from multiple nonprofits. You're just foreshadowing that when we get to that next meeting, that next step, we're talking money. And there's going to be a whole questioning strategy there once we get there. But the biggest thing is that we have to get this out of the way. And there are other things that you can throw in there as far as rules. If money's the first thing that you're worried about, we can throw in topics like this at the obviously part and say, you know, look, my biggest fear is that we might get derailed during our discussion about the budget. Do you want to talk about it now? My biggest fear is that I won't understand your needs. Can I ask you about those first before we set the next meeting? My biggest fear is that you won't, you know, discuss what your needs are. Can you remind me that we really need to talk about that when we kick off the next meeting? There are kind of some biggest fears in upfront contracts that we can talk about. And again, every meeting doesn't have to be this marathon 3-hour session where we cover everything. Set the meeting for an hour. Go over what we're going to discuss in that meeting and then define at the end of that what the next step looks like. At the end of that hour, you can wrap up and say, look, I really think we've covered some ground here and I think there is value in us moving forward, having a conversation. Can I suggest that we meet at another time? We can really discuss the situation further on what that commitment might look like. There's been meetings I've had where the person keeps picking up their phone and taking text messages or making calls where I just flat out said, hey, I'm going to suggest that we cancel this. Something clearly more important is going on. So rather than having these interruptions continue, why don't we just abort this meeting or reschedule for a future date? If in our upfront contract, we said, this is what we're going to do, we're going to set aside an hour and they don't hold to it, blow up the meeting. Come back when they're dedicated and they have time for it. Especially if it's in a donor meeting where it's going to be a multiple decision maker or a husband-wife team and only one of them shows up. Don't have the meeting. Oh, I expected so-and-so to be here. Why don't we reschedule when they can be? No, it's, you know, it's okay. We'll get through it. So a strong upfront contract gives you the opportunity to deal with your biggest fears up front. A strong upfront contract guarantees no interruptions during your meetings. And here's the big one. If we clearly define typically the way this will go in the ANOT, typically the way this will go, you'll tell me no, I'll tell you no, or we say yes, we define what a yes looks like. We have a strong, that requires a decision to be made at the end of each meeting. So when we say that typically and we end it with, are you okay with that? If at the end of that meeting they say, yeah, why don't you send me some information, I'll take a look at it. That wasn't the upfront contract. The upfront contract was a no or a yes, and if it's a yes, we define what it looks like. Had a meeting just last week, and the guy said, okay, this sounds really good, but we just have to get on the same page. 2 partners at the startup. Okay, so what does that look like? Nothing. It's probably a 5-minute conversation. It's going to make sure we're on the same page. If I was a real jerk, I would have said, guys, if we're going to move forward with this training, we have to be able to trust each other. So either have this conversation with me in front of me and it's a trust relationship, or I just realized there's not trust there and we close the file and move on. Instead, I took the high road and I said, you know what, this is good. I've got to check in on my kids. It'll take me about 5 minutes. Go ahead, have your 5-minute conversation. I'll step out in the lobby, check in on my kids. I'll come back in 5 minutes, and then we can either say no, close the file, and we move on, or We get a yes and we move forward. The look on their face when I said that was priceless when they went, like, he totally called our bluff. We had an upfront contract. We had to define at that end of that next meeting what the next steps were. Went out, texted my wife, checked all the messages in my group text from all my knucklehead hunting buddies. I didn't check it on my kids. I lied to them. My kids are 10, 9, and 5. They don't have cell phones. Came back in, said, all right, Chris, this makes sense. Let's move on to the next step. And the next step was not a big check. The next step was not a 5-figure training. The next step was an assessment. And they said, yep, let's do it. Right? There are ways that you can make sure that if you have an upfront contract, you either close the file or you move on. So, ANOT. Similar rules for upfront. Oh, this is what I just covered. Gives you opportunity to deal with your biggest fears up front. Guarantees no interruptions during your calls. Requires a decision to be made at each meeting. So, we are right up at 1 o'clock. Who's excited about week 5 and week 7?
I am.
So, what I would like to do is I would like to give you guys a homework assignment. And next week, we're going to jump in quickly with our I-10s and our VIPs and get right into practicing our upfront contracts. And that outline is going to ask you questions like, I'll even go, I think I can probably send you something. It's going to be an ANOT statement, and I'll even send you what mine looks like. And then within each ANOT, there's going to be stuff for you to cover, like date, time, purpose of the meeting, time set aside. The naturalies. What do you naturally expect your prospect to have questions for you on that you need to cover? The obviously's. What do we need to make sure we cover? Don't focus on doing your entire portfolio. Olivia, you just got done with a golf outing. What's the next step? You've got the golfers sold. Is it calling for sponsorships? Is it annual fund or corporate gifts? Is it a gala? Laurel, think about grants. Think about other asks you might have to make. Sarah, think about the conversation you're having with a prospective client and what a ANOT statement might sound like with them. Deal?
Deal.
Everyone have fun today? All right, can we get the big thumbs up from everybody? I always forget what the, who's got a Mac? What's the hotkey for a screenshot? I have to Google it. Mac screenshot is, Shift Command 3. All right. Ready? Everyone thumbs up. 1, 2, 3. Sarah, that's your thumb. All right, finally. I was a Windows guy forever. I'm just getting used to Mac. Guys, thank you very much. As always, thank you for participating. Text me, call me, email me if you have questions. I will send you an email following up. Go through the DISC stuff. Have more questions, let me know. But we're going to work on the ANOT in your upfront contract for next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with the golf outing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck on the golf outing.
It's the 31st, so I'll have one more class before then.
Perfect. We'll cover your ANOT statements then. All right, guys. Have a great week.
Bye.